I don't want to go swimming. I never liked my weekly Wednesday lessons. Yet, I also looked forward to Wednesdays, because it was the only day I could meet a certain girl. She was from a different school, and I could only see her on lesson days. I always waited for this girl named Jessica at the entrance of the swimming club. Whenever I saw Jessica coming alone, I kept waving at her vigorously. "Hey, Michael." "Hey, Jessica." Before we knew it, we became close friends. For me, that alone made my day happy. In first grade, I might have been precocious, but that was when I experienced the feeling of liking a girl for the first time. That was the beginning of my first love. My name is Michael Parker. Now, I work as a substitute teacher at a certain high school while coaching the swim team. Seeing the freshness of the 10th grade team members reminds me of the swimming lessons I hated. My first ever lesson was swimming. It wasn't something I started out of my own will. It was forced upon me by my parents' wishes. Every week, my mom would never let me skip, no matter how much I cried and resisted. Remembering how much I cried and fussed over just an hour of lesson once a week, I feel embarrassed, but it also brings back memories of my first love. It was the 4th time I went swimming. Like always, I was crying and screaming at the entrance, not wanting to go. Then, a girl approached me and taking my hand, she said, "Let's go together." That was my encounter with Jessica. The tears that had been flowing stopped abruptly when this unfamiliar girl spoke to me. Back then, in first grade, I was accompanied by my mom, but Jessica entered alone, changed, and came out to the pool side. Her confident behavior made me feel embarrassed about myself. After that, I stopped crying at the entrance of the swimming club. When I started showing up at the pool side without crying, Jessica began to look out for me when I was alone. "You came without crying today." Though I was a bit irritated by her slightly condescending tone, I was thrilled to be spoken to, and my heart raced. Trying not to let her see through me, I awkwardly boasted, "Yeah, I like swimming too." I was uttering words I had never thought of before. Afraid of putting my face in the water and opening my eyes, I pushed aside my fear and tried hard not to look uncool in front of Jessica. "Wow, you did it. Look, I can open my eyes underwater." I experienced the joy of being able to do something I couldn't do before. Since then, I started looking forward to Wednesdays, which I used to dislike. Because Jessica went to a different school, I could only see her on swimming lesson days. As we both got better at swimming, we shared our joy together. As I continued with the lessons, swimming became enjoyable for me. For me, Jessica was both a great rival and a dear friend. Fueled by the desire not to lose and the desire to learn together, I could see my swimming skills improving. I, who was once afraid of putting my face in water and opening my eyes underwater, managed to swim 25 meters in freestyle. Jessica, seeing my joy, was as happy for me as if it were her own achievement. As a child, I thought such days would go on forever, as if it were the most natural thing. Yet, one day, Jessica unexpectedly missed the lesson. I thought it was just a one-off absence, but she didn't come the next week or the week after that either. "Mr. Johnson, what happened to Jessica?" "Jessica, due to her family's circumstances, she moved away. That's why she quit at the end of last month." What? More than the fact that Jessica had quit, I was shocked that I hadn't been told anything. That day, I was so down that I couldn't even hear what Mr. Johnson was saying, and I couldn't focus on my practice. I hardly knew anything about Jessica, who I could only meet on lesson days since she was from a different school. I didn't know her home address or phone number, so there was no way to contact her. However, I didn't quit swimming. I thought that if I continued swimming, I would surely meet her again someday. That was about all I could come up with as a child. I joined the swimming team as my extracurricular activity when I became a junior high student. I, who could barely swim 25 meters, was able to grow to the point where I could swim 100 meters and compete with others. If Jessica was still swimming, she might recognize me when my name was called at a competition. That was the only reason I practiced so hard. Thanks to that, I became a swimmer who could set records at competitions. Still, I couldn't happen to meet Jessica by chance. Gradually forgetting Jessica's face and voice, I became a high school student. I decided to go to a local high school that was enthusiastic about extracurricular activities, intending to choose the swim team again. The day after the entrance ceremony, I entered the classroom nervously in my brand new uniform. Just as I was about to sit in my seat, I heard someone calling my name. "Michael, long time no see." In front of me was a girl with long, flowing hair and a beaming smile looking at me. I looked at her in disbelief, silent. "Jessica, you're looking at me as if you've seen a ghost. We're in the same school now." It was Jessica, whom I hadn't seen in 5 years. She was my first love, whom I had always wanted to meet again. She had grown into an adult and was smiling right beside me. The excitement of waiting for Jessica, whom I could only meet on Wednesdays, came rushing back in an instant. Ignoring the nostalgic feelings I was reminiscing, Jessica started talking. I thought I might meet some familiar faces if I applied to this school, and here I am, meeting you, Michael. My heart raced as Jessica spoke her mind clearly. Trying not to let Jessica catch on, I kept my composure while looking at her face. "Why did you suddenly quit swimming?" It was something I had always wanted to ask if I ever met her again. "My mom got remarried, and we had to move all of a sudden." "Michael, you continued swimming after that, right? I saw somewhere that you set a new record at a competition. That's awesome." "Wow, thanks. It's hard to believe you were always crying and afraid back then." "Shut up." Jessica chuckled as she saw me flustered, amused by my reaction. I immediately submitted my application to join the swim team. "Michael, are you joining the swim team? Maybe I'll become the team assistant." "You don't swim anymore." "Yeah, I didn't improve that much." Saying that, Jessica submitted her application to join the swim team as a team assistant. From then on, we started having casual conversations in class and during activities, just like when we were kids. I was so happy to feel like we had gone back to our childhood days so quickly, even though we hadn't seen each other for 5 years. This joy reminded me of my first love. I couldn't help but be concerned about Jessica. Not wanting to experience the same sadness as when we were kids, I tried to get closer to Jessica, but without the courage to do so. Our relationship remained the same as always. I couldn't advance beyond being just friends. Carrying that frustration, I decided that after finishing the district tournament in my second year of high school, I would confess to Jessica no matter the outcome. If possible, I wanted to update my personal best and achieve a good result before calling out to Jessica. I put even more effort into my usual practice than ever before. Yet, 2 days before the tournament, misfortune struck me. I was hit by a car that failed to stop, with no brakes applied. The bicycle I was riding was split in two. My body flew through the air and was slammed to the ground. When I came to, I was on a hospital bed. Though I had survived, my left leg below the knee was gone. What happened to my leg? Unable to get up from the bed due to the shock of the accident, I managed to lift my head to look at both legs under the blanket. While there was a bulge where my right leg was, the area below the knee of my left leg was flat. Why? Where did my leg go? I took my father's hand, who was beside me, and asked with a trembling voice, "Michael." Next to my father, my mother was covering her face with her hands, crying. My father couldn't say anything but hug me and cried together as I shed tears. Lying in bed, I just stared blankly at the ceiling. Friends from middle school, high school, the swim team coach, and even Jessica came to visit me, but I didn't want to see anyone's face, nor did I want anyone to see me like this. Only Jessica came to visit me many times. She would knock on the door of the hospital room and show her face. "Don't come in, go away." I threw cold words at her. "I'll come again tomorrow." Saying that, Jessica closed the door of the hospital room. Curled up under the blanket, I couldn't stop crying. Despite my attitude not changing, Jessica kept visiting me day after day. About 2 weeks after the accident, I let Jessica into my room. I guess my persistence paid off. She laughed mischievously, showing a playful smile. "Why aren't you angry? This is just me lashing out." I was irritated that Jessica wasn't getting angry. I don't know. I just couldn't stop worrying about you, Michael." Jessica answered, and I had my face under the blanket. I couldn't hold back my tears because I was touched by her kindness. I didn't want to show such a pathetic sight. Yet, Jessica pulled back the blanket. "You're crying, right, Michael? You haven't changed at all, from the past to now. When you want to cry, cry boldly." Hearing those words from Jessica, my tears suddenly stopped. She had seen me crying many times when I was a child. Pretending to be cool now wouldn't change the impression of me being a crybaby. I don't know how to act now that I'm like this. "Why, you are still you, Michael. Just be yourself as always," Jessica said with a serious face. Looking at Jessica's face, I felt silly for moping about something changing. Right, I'm still me. Exactly, you is you. Not anything more, not anything less. What's that supposed to mean? I managed to smile a bit at Jessica's brightness. "Thanks for treating me the same." "Hey, what's that about? It's not very like you, Michael." "What do you mean, not like me?" Finally, I found the courage to face my current situation. I started to think about the fact that I was still alive, even after losing my leg. Up until now, I had spent most of my time practicing swimming. When I thought about what would remain of me now that swimming was taken away from me, I was filled with nothing but anxiety. However, Jessica, knowing my anxiety, or perhaps by coincidence, came to visit me every day. We engaged in mundane conversations, talking about things that happened at school or about a television show we watched the day before. Just that was enough to alleviate my anxieties. I began walking practice with a prosthetic leg and was discharged from the hospital when I got used to it. Months later, I returned to school. Upon returning to school, I consulted with Mr. Williams, who was both my class teacher and the swim team coach. Addressing my concerns about the future, Mr. Williams said, "For 17-year-old you, there are many possibilities ahead. Carrying a handicap might be tough, but it also enables you to empathize with those in weaker positions. How about becoming an amazing teacher like me?" "Hey, Mr. Williams, you're amazing." I deadpanned at Mr. Williams's joking remark, which made him laugh embarrassingly. But seeing Mr. Williams, I genuinely started to want to become a teacher. The first person I shared my newfound dream with was Jessica. "Hey teacher, you'll have to study hard from now on. I'll help you study." We started studying together in the library after school. Then, I went to university to pursue teaching, and Jessica went to a different university. Even though we were heading down separate paths, my desire to be with Jessica as before grew stronger, and I finally confessed my feelings during our graduation ceremony. Jessica was delighted, and I was at the peak of happiness. Whenever I experienced such happiness, my thoughts inevitably turned to swimming and the records I had set. I didn't have a specific goal of participating in big tournaments, but I was proud of my swimming achievements. Yet, due to the sudden loss of my leg, my life as an athlete ended in an instant. I knew there were people swimming with handicaps, but I couldn't forgive myself for not being able to swim as before and stop swimming altogether. However, the human heart is selfish, and I found it sad to completely let go of something. Jessica seemed to sense my mixed feelings. That's why, for the first time, she brought up something she had never mentioned before. "Why don't you try swimming again, Michael? For your health, you know, there are swimming classes at school too." I felt as if Jessica saw right through me, and out of embarrassment and frustration, I yelled at her. "How could you understand how I feel?" That was our first fight since we started dating. It was more of a one-sided outburst from me than a fight, and Jessica just listened without saying a word. After the fight, we didn't contact each other. We, who used to exchange trivial emails every day, suddenly went about 2 weeks without any communication. I wanted to apologize by email many times, but the longer I waited, the harder it became to say. Determined, I went to Jessica's university to apologize in person and waited for her. A few minutes later, Jessica appeared at the main gate. As I was about to call out to her, I noticed she was with a guy. Even if he was just a university friend, I turned away, not wanting to see them together. At that moment, a thought crossed my mind. Jessica might be happier with another man, someone without a disability like me. I decided it was time to stop holding Jessica back. With that thought, I changed my phone number that day and cut off all contact with Jessica. Later, I obtained my teaching license and secured a job at a private high school. Shortly after I started working as a high school teacher, the school, aware of my achievements, asked me to coach the swim team. I haven't swum in years, so I'm not confident I can provide proper guidance. Of course, I intended to decline by saying just that. Yet, not one to back down easily, I ended up taking on the role of swim team coach in my first year as a teacher. Initially nervous, I soon found joy in coaching the kids, unable to forget the swimmer I once was. Watching the children improve rapidly, I became passionate about coaching. As a result, the swim team, which hadn't even placed in competitions, started achieving remarkable results. Even I, who had given up on swimming, began to feel the urge to swim again. And inevitably, I would remember the time I fought and parted ways with Jessica. Perhaps things between Jessica and me would have been different if I had listened to her that day. One day, while pondering such thoughts, I heard through some friends that Jessica had gotten married. Although it might be a lie to say I wasn't shocked, I was genuinely happy to hear such joyful news. In my heart, I wished for Jessica's happiness. From then on, I threw myself into coaching the swim team to forget about Jessica. The students rapidly improved under my guidance, undergoing a transformation unlike anything from when I first started coaching. However, a sudden misfortune struck. One day, 11 years after I started coaching the swim team, a student, possibly due to exhaustion, stumbled after getting out of the pool and hit his head on the pool side. Although it resulted in a cut and bleeding, it was not a serious injury. However, I was criticized by a parent who suggested that the student's injury might have been due to my excessive coaching. I apologized sincerely many times. Following the incident, the way the school looked at me changed. People who had once praised me for the swim team's records now looked at me coldly, as if they had turned their backs on me. Feeling frustrated and betrayed, I submitted my resignation and quit teaching. Though I was downcast, I thought that maybe there was something else I was meant to do, considering I had survived the accident, and decided to look overseas. I wanted to teach swimming to children abroad. But could I really abandon the swim team students who had followed my passionate coaching and just run away from America? I pondered this until the moment I boarded the plane, reminding myself that life is once. I left America with a mix of regret and hope. Then one day, as I was traveling abroad, I received tragic news. Mr. Williams, the high school teacher who had inspired me to become a teacher, had passed away. I immediately decided to return to America. Arriving back in America after a long time, I felt the weight of the 10 years that had passed since I quit teaching. Despite my grief, I attended Mr. Williams's funeral. Meeting old friends there, I looked around, half expecting to see Jessica, when Sarah, Mr. Williams's widow, approached me. "You're Michael, right?" "Yes, my condolences." After I spoke in a subdued tone, she responded, "Thank you. Having everyone here would certainly have pleased my husband." Despite her expression of sorrow, Mrs. Williams continued speaking. "During his lifetime, my husband was very concerned about you, Michael. After you left teaching, if it's all right with you, would you consider returning as a swim team coach?" Hearing this, I was reminded of my past regrets. Taking up the coach's role might allow me to overcome the regrets that had been smoldering inside me. I decided to work as a substitute teacher at my alma mater. As soon as I returned to the familiar pool for daily practice, a flood of memories, both sweet and bitter, rushed back to me. "Hello." While I was standing dazed by the poolside, a cheerful voice of a girl called out to me. Her voice was so similar to Jessica's that I turned around in confusion. "Are you the new coach by any chance?" "Nice to meet you. I'm Michael Parker." "I'm Megan, the swim team captain. Nice to meet you." "Isn't the practice supposed to be off today?" "Yes, but I feel weird taking a day off, so I came to do some strength training." "Wow, you're quite serious, huh?" "Mr. Parker, you used to practice here, right? I saw the shields and trophies in front of the staff room." "Ahaha, those were the glories of the past." And so, after 10 years, my job as a teacher at my alma mater began. Soon after, I encountered someone special. On a day, some parents came to watch the extracurricular activities. That's where I found Jessica. It seemed like an illusion at first, but Jessica was talking with Megan, the student. "Look, Mom, that's Mr. Parker, our new coach." "Hey, Michael," Jessica murmured, standing there stunned. "Hey, Mom, you know him." Megan's words didn't reach me, and I was looking at Jessica as she said, "We were high school classmates, right, Mr. Parker?" "Jer, it's quite a surprise to meet a classmate like this." Jessica, whom I met after a long time, had a few wrinkles on her face, showing the passage of time, but she still had the same smile as before. On another day, Megan, having learned that her mother and I were classmates, told me about her family background without being asked. My dad and mom were classmates in college. Then, my dad passed away when I was in my second year of middle school. Now, it's just the two of us. She shared this with a smile on her face. You might think so what? But Mom was looking at a photo of her and you together the other day. She didn't notice I was behind her. She quickly hid it, but she still kept it all this time. I couldn't meet Megan's gaze. I've never seen it before, and she was really close with my dad, but maybe meeting you again unlocked something that was sealed away. Hearing this, I remained silent. After that, my feelings for Jessica seemed to resurface, and she was all I could think about. I couldn't look properly at Megan, her daughter, even though I was the coach. The more I tried to focus on my job as a swim coach, the more Jessica's face would appear in my mind. Meeting Jessica again under these circumstances made me wonder if it was a gift from God. This time, I wanted to make Jessica happy. From the bottom of my heart, that's what I felt. On a day when there was no club activity, Jessica came to the practice venue alone for some reason. I was swimming in the pool, wearing my prosthetic leg, with no students around. When I surfaced, I saw Jessica and was confused. Is something wrong? Actually, my daughter asked me to come watch today's practice, but today is an off day for the practice, isn't it? I immediately realized that Megan had been considerate. Megan. I wonder if Jessica noticed her daughter being considerate. She was laughing as if she found it amusing. Before I could say anything, Jessica started speaking first. Your swimming is just like it used to be. I'm relieved to see you still swimming. No, it's different. Meeting you made me want to swim again. I finally apologized for the day we had a falling out. I'm sorry for yelling at you that day. I thought you'd be happier with the man you were with, so I changed my phone number back then. The man? You mean my husband? He told me it was okay to have someone else in my heart. Jessica looked down, embarrassed. He made me happy, but Jessica seemed about to say something but held back. I'm going to live honestly from now on. I don't want to give up swimming, and Struggling to find the right words, I mumbled, but Jessica was smiling at me. So, like when we were kids, would you support me again? Jessica laughed softly and extended her little finger towards me. What, really? It's a pinky promise. This time, don't disappear without me knowing. I extended my right pinky and made a pinky promise with Jessica. A single tear rolled down Jessica's cheek. After that, we talked about many things. Jessica shared her feelings about moving away due to her mother's marriage, the fight we had, and how suddenly she lost contact with me. She openly shared her joy at our reunion when I became her daughter's swim team coach, not hiding anything from me. Jessica's confident demeanor hadn't changed from when we were kids to now, making me feel somewhat pathetic for not being able to be honest about my feelings. Still, determined to respond to Jessica's willingness to be by my side, I vowed never to leave her side again. Looking into Jessica's eyes, I made that solemn promise in my heart. I want to live with them. It was this simple sentence that would change our lives forever. I looked directly into the eyes of the sister's grandmother and said, "Excuse me for being straightforward, but would it be all right for my wife and I to adopt Emma and Claire, and take full responsibility for raising them?" At these words, not only did she, but also the sisters listening from behind, were visibly shocked. It's natural to be suspicious of someone who says such a thing just after meeting them, and I didn't expect immediate approval. Of course, I intended to consult the proper authorities and proceed with the necessary procedures. Somehow, I just couldn't bear the thought of leaving these two alone, because I saw my past self in them. And 6 months later, the situation took a dramatic turn. I've been thinking, I want to entrust my granddaughters to you. My name is Nathan, a 29-year-old office worker. I married Elizabeth 2 years ago. We don't have any children. We met in a hospital. At the time, I was 25 and fell in love at first sight. In the hospital store, she was lining up at the register with a sickeningly sweet cream donut and an overly sweet milk tea. For some reason, I found myself speaking to her as she left the store. "Excuse me, could I get your contact information?" Assuming I was just another flirt, she naturally brushed me off. I ended up exposing myself in an awkward attempt. However, I couldn't give up. I wanted to know more about her. Before I knew it, I found myself visiting the store during work breaks. I'm a regular employee at a pharmaceutical company, often visiting this hospital for work. After 12 p.m., joining the queue of patients and doctors buying lunch, I'd always spot her. Looking back, my behavior might have seemed stalker-like and creepy. Approaching her with an invisible tail wagging, I must have looked like a pathetic dog to others. Perhaps due to my persistence, she gradually started to indulge in small talk with me. A few months after meeting her, she questioned me. "Why do you pay so much attention to me? From any angle, you look younger than me." She said something like that. By then, I still didn't know her name. And she didn't know mine. We just happened to meet and converse casually. That's the kind of relationship we had. I've never really thought about the age thing. It all started because I thought your profile was beautiful. Oh, and that strange combination. Doesn't it give you indigestion? I said, pointing at the donut and milk tea she always bought. She puffed her cheeks in complaint. "Shut up. My work requires a lot of brain power and is exhausting, so my body craves something sweet. Nathan, don't overwork yourself either. Without health, you can't even work." With that, she handed me back a business card I had dropped. I'll never forget the moment my name was first called. As I continued my relentless pursuit, she eventually revealed her name to be Elizabeth. From there, Elizabeth and I began to meet privately, leading me to propose marriage when I was 27. People sure have strange tastes. That was Elizabeth's response to my proposal. Let's return to the present. I'm now 29, but Elizabeth, being 10 years my senior, is currently 39. Her hesitance to open up to me was probably due to rage. Indeed, when I proposed dating her, she said something along these lines. "I'm honestly too busy to even think about dating," which usually makes most guys think I'm being conceited, and it ticks them off when I say it. But it's the truth, and I felt it was something I needed to convey. Moreover, I'm past the age considered ideal for pregnancy and childbirth, so having kids might not be in the cards for me. None of that mattered to me. When we first met, I honestly had no idea what she did for a living. But seeing her in a lab coat, working night shifts, and barely having time to sleep, it was clear she was a doctor. That's what I thought. In fact, when she met me, she was a surgeon. I figured she must be busy, but then she suddenly switched specialties one day. I wondered where to, and it turned out to be otolaryngology. It was a completely different field, so I was surprised when I heard about it. But the reason made sense. I've always wanted to pursue otolaryngology, but I thought having surgical experience would reassure patients in cases where surgery is needed. Actually, my father runs an otolaryngology clinic back home, she said. My father-in-law's skills were astonishing. Though the sign said otolaryngology, he could also see patients for internal and general surgery. Sometimes, he could even handle cases that required oral surgery, thanks to his experience. Of course, a clinic with such a skilled doctor was always packed. They start handing out appointment numbers just after 8 a.m., but it's not unusual to see people lining up before 7 a.m. on Saturdays. Even though they only do consultations in the morning on Saturdays, they sometimes stay open until past 6 p.m., and during peak allergy seasons, they can be seeing patients until almost 9 p.m. Now we've put some limits in place. Though consultations start at 9 a.m., you can't get a morning slot if you arrive at that time. If my father, who has been working hard for the community, were to leave, the patients would be in trouble, right? That's what I'm aiming to be the next trustworthy clinic director, she explained. I fell for Elizabeth all over again. I sort of just graduated from high school and university and landed a job at a major company through connections with Professor Anderson from my seminar, who had ties to pharmaceutical companies. But Elizabeth, she had a clear vision of what she wanted to do and was working towards it. I wholeheartedly wanted to support her in achieving things I could never dream of. That's why I thought it wouldn't be so bad to just spend our lives together as a couple. At 29, many of my peers were getting married and having kids, but I didn't envy them. Having Elizabeth, my beloved wife, was more than enough for me. Then, one day, Elizabeth had just quit the hospital she was working at to take over her father's clinic as the next director. Because of that, her days became incredibly busy, and she was so exhausted she had bags under her eyes. The clinic was popular to start off with, but now it was Elizabeth and her father, who mainly supported her in consultations. And the place was in chaos with all the patients who had heard the news. "I just wanted to take a walk for a change of pace," she said. So, we decided to go for a walk at night. Lately, the daffodils had started to bloom, and the mornings and evenings felt a bit more comfortable. While enjoying the pleasant night breeze during our walk, we noticed something unfamiliar sitting in a corner of the park near our house. It looked like a cardboard box. Maybe some neighborhood kids were playing and made a cardboard house. I was about to ignore it when my sight moved slightly. Elizabeth also looked at it curiously. Then, the box swayed from side to side again. There was no wind blowing. That meant something alive was inside. It could be a stray cat, I thought. As I approached and peered inside, I was surprised by what I saw. Inside, instead of a dog or a cat, there were two girls with the same face. They were wrapped in newspaper, using it as a blanket, and next to them were two backpacks that seemed to belong to them. By their looks, they were definitely elementary school students. "Hey, what are you doing out here at this time? Are you playing make-believe? Your parents must be worried, so we need to contact, well, the police, maybe." As I reached for my phone, one of the girls said, "Please don't call the police." "Why not? I don't know about your parents, but surely this is. If our parents get arrested, we'll be in trouble. We'd become children of criminals," she said with a clarity that seemed beyond her years, making me feel uneasy. The girl who spoke to me seemed composed, but her sister was just fidgeting, not even trying to look at us. I was at a loss for what to do, but leaving them here and going back home as if nothing happened didn't sit right with me. So, I suggested, "You might catch a cold staying out here, and there could be some strange people around. How about you come to our place for now?" Elizabeth immediately retorted, "That makes us sound like the suspicious ones." Thinking about it, I couldn't find any better way to phrase it. As expected, the girl who had spoken to me earlier raised her voice. "We've been told by teachers and grandparents not to follow strangers." As I was racking my brain over what to do, Elizabeth seemed to remember something and asked the girls their age. They said they were 9-year-old twins and seemed to live nearby. After a moment of thought, Elizabeth scrolled through her phone's camera roll and showed them a photo of two girls. The twins' eyes widened. "Wait, that's Stacy and Katie. So, you're classmates with my nieces." Nieces? Elizabeth has a sister about my age, who has two daughters, Stacy, 9, and Katie, 11. Since my sister-in-law's family lives in this area, it seemed like a fortunate coincidence. Suddenly, the sister's wariness began to melt away. "I'm Stacy's mom's sister." "Really?" "Yeah, it's dangerous to stay out here, so why don't you come to our place for now?" Perhaps because they realized we were related to a friend's parent, the girls exchanged looks and then slowly nodded. I thought it was best to contact the police immediately, but protecting them was a priority. So, I invited them home. Their names were apparently Emma and Claire, with Emma being the one who had spoken up confidently to us, and Claire, who had remained silent behind her sister. They looked so alike, being identical twins, that it was hard to tell them apart. They hadn't eaten anything since lunch at school, so we gave them some water and prepared a bath for them to use. While they bathed, I laid out some guest mattresses, and Elizabeth prepared some light snacks. After their bath, the girls eagerly ate everything and fell asleep within minutes, worn out from the day. The next morning, before 6 a.m., as I was getting ready for work, Elizabeth, with a serious look on her face, said, "I want to live with those girls." I was surprised by her sudden statement, but after listening to her, I could understand why she felt that way. Elizabeth had talked to her sister on the phone last night. When she mentioned Emma and Claire, her sister said, "Oh, they are well known," and filled her in on the details. Apparently, the girls are the daughters of a notorious couple known for bad behavior in school, but most people don't really know much about their parents. In our area, school meals have to be paid for, and it seems Emma and Claire often couldn't have them because their parents didn't give them the meal fees. However, their teacher, worried about malnutrition, would share his own meal with them, and classmates would share foods they didn't like, so they somehow managed to eat. How did they manage to live under such harsh conditions? It was largely thanks to their grandparents. An elderly couple was frequently seen visiting their house, likely to be grandparents looking after them. Their parents often went out in flashy clothes, and recently, even the neighbors hadn't seen them. Though it wasn't clear if this was true, when I asked Emma for confirmation, she nonchalantly confirmed it. "Yes, we haven't seen Mom and Dad for about a year now. Grandpa and Grandma used to come by, but they didn't show up yesterday." "Where do your grandparents live?" I asked. "They live in public housing about a 10-minute drive from here," they told me. Elizabeth was swamped with taking over the clinic, only having Sundays and Thursdays off. And today being Wednesday, I decided to take the day off work to visit the girls' grandparents. I thought about contacting the police, but the girls seemed to indicate their grandparents were responsible people. So I decided to check on the grandparents first and quickly got ready to leave. After a 10-minute drive, we arrived at the public housing where the grandparents lived. Emma led us to their apartment and pressed the doorbell, but no one answered. While waiting, a middle-aged woman from the next apartment came out. Recognizing the girls, she informed us that their grandparents had been taken away in an ambulance around noon yesterday and might be in the nearby medical center. I was met with suspicious stares, but when Emma stated, "He's our guardian," the tension was diffused. At the medical center, after explaining the situation, they allowed us, as family, to visit the grandparents. I was led into the ward under the guise of being the guardian of the young sisters. We were led to a 4-bedroom, with 2 beds empty and their grandparents lying in the beds by the window. The grandmother, who was awake and saw us, allowed the visit. The grandfather appeared to be still asleep. "We're so sorry to have caused you trouble." The grandmother began apologetically. "No, not at all. I'm just glad we could meet, actually, about yesterday." I briefly explained what had happened the day before. Hearing this, tears started to roll down the grandmother's cheeks. "I'm so sorry, Emma, Claire. I'm sorry we were hospitalized, and you couldn't get in because we had the keys." Apparently, they had eaten some bad food around noon the previous day and unfortunately got sick, leading to their emergency transport. Their condition had stabilized, and they were expected to be discharged today. However, they had been incapacitated by abdominal pain for a while and hadn't been able to go to the girls. They had kept the house keys to ensure they wouldn't get lost, but that had backfired. I was relieved to hear that the grandparents were decent people, unlike the parents. Emma's confidence probably stemmed from knowing her grandparents would never abandon them. For now, my role as a guardian would end once the grandparents were discharged, which was a relief, though it didn't align with Elizabeth's wishes. However, the grandmother looked troubled. And then, she spoke slowly. "To be honest, we're in a tight financial situation. My husband and I have been self-employed, but our daughter and her husband took all our assets. Now we're living on just our pension. I should be offering you a reward, but that's difficult for us." No, you don't need to worry about that at all. If they're receiving a pension, they must be at least 62 years old. I thought about suggesting they live together, but it wasn't as simple as that. Moving the sisters would change their school district since the public housing where the grandparents lived was across a bridge. Changing young children's living environment could be stressful. And even if they could live together, there was no knowing when the grandparents might fall again. Surely, the grandmother must be worried about that. If they fell again, there would be no one to take care of the girls. Seeing their worried expressions, I couldn't keep quiet. May I speak frankly? What is it? My wife and I would like to adopt Emma and Claire and take full responsibility for raising them. Both the grandmother and the listening sisters were visibly shocked by my statement. Naturally, they'd be wary of someone they just met offering to do such a thing, and I didn't expect immediate approval. Of course, I planned to consult the appropriate authorities and proceed with the proper procedures. I just couldn't bear the thought of leaving them alone. Perhaps because they reminded me of myself when I was younger. My parents raised me with great care, but we lived in extreme poverty until our family business took off. Despite being financially strained themselves, they bought me a warm quilt in the dead of winter to prevent me from catching a cold. My wife and I don't have children, but I just couldn't stand by and do nothing about Emma and Claire. For the time being, I decided it was best to end the conversation there and head home. With the grandparents discharged from the hospital, it seemed Emma and Claire would be spending their time in that public housing for the moment. However, the situation took a sudden turn 6 months later. After discussing it with my husband, we've decided to entrust the girls to you and your wife, the grandmother said. What? It's not only that we're impressed by your genuine concern, but also a matter of trust. Over the past 6 months, you and your wife have met with us several times to express your intentions, haven't you? We could see that you truly care for our granddaughters. That's why we believe we can entrust them to you. Besides, the fact that Elizabeth took over her father's clinic and had become the director played a role. Moreover, the grandparents have been greatly helped by Elizabeth's father. Above all, what sealed the decision was something Emma said. If it means Claire, Grandpa and Grandma can be safe, I'm okay with anything. Plus, that man was kind, and the lady is Stacy's mom's sister. And she's a doctor, you know. Stacy is my best friend, so it's all good. Thus, with the involvement of child welfare services and the police, we finally managed to contact the sisters' biological parents. When we mentioned the possibility of adoption, the parents' representative quickly agreed. After several months, we were finally able to officially become a family with Emma and Claire. Elizabeth, now a practicing physician, was busy every day. Adding childcare and household chores to the mix made things chaotic. Emma, Claire, you forgot your gym clothes and lunch bags. While frying eggs, I watched my wife and children scurry about. We initially shared household duties, but with Elizabeth working late and on Saturdays, I took on a larger share of the chores. That arrangement was mutually agreed upon. So I was usually in charge of cooking. Drawn by the smell of breakfast, my wife and children packed their bags and joined me at the table. This is delicious. It's been a while since we had something not microwaved. It's really good, thank you. The twins, identical in appearance, sparkled with excitement as they complimented the meal. Apparently, they were used to reheating meals prepared by their grandparents, so freshly made food was a treat for them. They were also happy to finally have their own portions of school lunches, and I heard their teacher, Miss Thompson, was moved to tears by the news. Despite their parents' unforgivable behavior, the warmth of the people around them allowed the girls to grow up well-adjusted. It was now my responsibility to continue guiding them until they became independent adults. I was determined to fulfill this duty. Since my family owned a bakery, I decided to visit on weekends to update them. We had been too busy to inform my parents about the adoption. So, when they suddenly found out they had granddaughters, they were shocked but quickly embraced them. teaching the girls how to bake bread and enjoying quality time together. A year after Emma and Claire became part of our family, our lives gradually settled, and the girls began to open up to us more. Emma, always the more reserved, began to show more childlike behaviors appropriate for her age. "Let's go play basketball, father." "I'm not sure I can keep up with your energy, Emma." "Come on, it'll be fine." Feeling the tug of her small hand, I was deeply moved. Interestingly, they call us father and mother, possibly to differentiate from dad and mom, which might remind them of their biological parents. They were happy to eat the same school lunches and use the same textbooks as their peers, enjoying a normal childhood. Eventually, both girls graduated from elementary school, with Emma attending a public middle school and Claire a private one. Living together helped us understand their personalities better. Emma was lively and good at basketball. On the other hand, Claire, while not fond of physical activities, consistently tops her class with her innate intelligence. Furthermore, she seems to be doing well in the marching band she joined. Everyone aware of their past hardships celebrated their growth. As twins, they faced their educational transitions together. But Emma chose a public middle school with a strong basketball program, satisfied without pursuing entrance exams. Claire, feeling hesitant about progressing to a public school while her sister opted for it. Emma had been offering her positive and kind words. "Claire, you're better at studying than me, so you should go to a private school. Then, I can brag about how my sister is super smart and attends a prestigious private school. And to make you proud of me, I'll work hard in basketball and aim for the national tournament." Hearing her sister's words, Claire was convinced and successfully got into a challenging private middle school. Even before we met, these sisters must have been living by complementing each other's deficiencies. That was evident from their conversation. Time flew by quickly, and the children turned 18. They had become fine adults. Claire managed to get into a medical school after acing her university entrance exams. On the other hand, influenced by her sister, Emma also chose to pursue a career in medicine. She decided to go to a nursing school. Recently, I think they both have started to resemble Elizabeth a lot. Elizabeth, who never skimped on household chores despite being busy. Especially, her love for the two was very profound. Receiving such affection from their mother, they naturally became good at household chores without being taught. On Mother's Day and Father's Day, they would use their part-time job earnings to buy gifts or invite us to a lavish dinner, making Elizabeth cry tears of joy every year. I too felt a lump in my throat, realizing how sincerely and kindly they have grown up. Of course, there were rebellious phases, but that's an important time for growth for both parents and children. After those solid clashes, now I believe our family of 4 is tightly bonded. And finally, 15 years after taking them in have passed. At 24, it was time for them to leave home. Claire had passed her medical licensing exam and was going to work as a resident in a distant hospital. Emma was getting married to a man she had been dating from the Navy. The time for farewell, which was bound to come, had arrived. Elizabeth managed to hold back her tears and gave them the biggest smile she could muster. Then, Claire, who had been fidgeting, ran to Elizabeth and hugged her gently. "I'll definitely become a wonderful woman like you, Mother. Thank you for teaching me so much about love." With an untroubled smile, Claire's eyes were moist. Following that, Emma also held Elizabeth's hand and said, "Stay healthy, Mother," as the three shared a tight hug. Then, turning to me, Emma said, "Father, thank you for doing so much for us." Claire added, "I'll become a great person like you," and with that, the two left home. Claire is still single, but as she steps into society, she'll surely live in a new home with a wonderful husband. And Emma will create a family with a kind-hearted young man and someday they will have children. I watched their departure with a blurred vision. After a while, an invitation to Emma's wedding arrived. Of course, I informed them of my attendance, and on the day of the wedding, next to Emma, who was clad in a pure white dress, Elizabeth was shedding tears. It was then that Claire said this. "Actually, I've been hiding this, but I've been dating someone since my student days. I'll introduce you sometime." Hearing this, we looked at each other and chuckled. The venue was filled with a celebratory mood, everyone eagerly awaiting the entrance of the bride and groom. But then, an unexpected incident occurred. An uninvited person arrived, causing a commotion among the reception staff. Upon inquiring, it turned out that a woman claiming to be Emma and Claire's mother had barged in. "Elizabeth, wait here, it might be dangerous," I said. Unable to stay put, I rushed to the reception. There, a middle-aged woman in tattered clothes was present. "Let me see my daughters. I am Emma's mom, you know. Claire is here too, right? So I have the right to meet them and attend." She was making a scene in a shrill voice. I wondered how this woman knew the whereabouts of the children she had abandoned 15 years ago. Then, a staff member at the venue informed me. It seems she works at a nearby florist, maybe part-time, and when Emma, the bride, came to see the flowers herself, she immediately noticed their resemblance and connected the dots based on their names. That's how she knew about the date and had the audacity to show up today. What are you thinking? Trying to act like Emma and Claire's mom now? Don't you remember what you did to them 15 years ago? My voice trembled with anger. Then, with a shadow in her eyes, she said, "I regret abandoning them at that time. My boyfriend back then told me the kids were in the way. My ex-husband, who I had cheated on, dumped me immediately and cut off all contact. As I got older, I was cheated on by my boyfriend too, and all that's left for me now are the children." I was so astounded by her selfish reasoning that I went beyond anger to disbelief. So in the end, she cheated, got divorced from her ex-husband, and then was abandoned herself. Now she says all that's left are the girls. Enough already. As I raised my voice, she flinched and cowered. "How can you be so selfish? This is all the result of your own actions. You have no right to call yourself a mother." As I said this, my fists began to tremble, and I felt an impulsive urge to act. At that moment, Emma, in her wedding dress, came over and called out "Mom." Upon seeing her mom, the mom, with a gaunt face, brightened up and said yes, as she stood up and started to rush towards Emma. I felt frustrated, wondering if we, as adoptive parents, couldn't match up to their biological parent. But then, Emma smiled briefly before turning serious and said, "Mom passed away a long time ago." Her mom stopped in her tracks at the sudden statement, but Emma continued unfazed. "When we were officially adopted 15 years ago, you both agreed, right? Or rather, it seems like Dad had already given up on us, including you. From what you've just said, I guess it was convenient for Mom's boyfriend to have us out of the way for adoption. From that moment, my mom and Dad were as good as dead to me. The only people who have a right to be here today are my father and mother. Please do not enter." Hearing such words from her own daughter, the mom became enraged, her face turning red as she screamed incoherently. "I was the one who gave birth to you. Do you have any idea how hard it was to carry and deliver twins? Why don't you understand?" I wished she would keep her presumptuous gratitude to herself. Having children isn't a goal, it's the start. The moment she abandoned that responsibility, she lost all right to expect gratitude or understanding. In the end, the noisy mom was escorted out by security. The mood had become awkward, but Emma, with her inherent brightness, managed the situation. I'm glad Claire and Mother weren't here. If they were, they would surely have been crying and hurt. Let's get back to the wedding preparations now. Excuse me, staff, I'm sorry, but could I have a moment to touch up my makeup? Revived by Emma's words, the staff exchanged looks of agreement and hurried back to the dressing room. Emma then turned back, not with the dry sneer from before, but with her usual gentle smile, saying, "Father, make sure you get a good look at me today," and left with a thumbs up. True to her word, Emma held a magnificent wedding ceremony that moved everyone present. Elizabeth was so moved by the bride's letter that she was wiping her nose in tears as she listened. Watching my fully grown daughter, I thought that if we hadn't taken in those two huddled behind the cardboard box back then, this future might not have existed. After the successful wedding ceremony, reception, and after party, the day came to a close. As we were about to leave, the two of them stopped us. "You two are our only parents. We love you forever. Father, Mother, take care of yourselves." Elizabeth hugged Emma tightly, saying, "That's our line. We will always love you, forever and ever." Claire and I watched the two from behind. Then, Claire whispered something to me. Though I was surprised by what she said, I placed my hand on her shoulder and told her, "You got this," and she smiled softly. A few years later, Elizabeth, having reached 60, stepped down from her position as hospital director, and Claire took over as the new director. Having suffered from allergies like rhinitis since childhood, Claire was concerned about the scarcity of otolaryngology clinics in the area once Elizabeth retired. She had decided to become an otolaryngologist herself and carry on Elizabeth's legacy. On that wedding day, Claire had told me, "I plan to take over Mother's Hospital. Professor Johnson's and seniors say I'm skilled and decisive, so surgery suits me. But I still want to be a doctor like Mother. Surgery might be more lucrative, but I want to be a doctor who can empathize with patients. Just like Mother. That's something I absolutely won't compromise on." Later, Claire introduced us to her boyfriend. He was a classmate from medical school who had chosen internal medicine. It seemed he shared the same aspirations as Claire. Thus, Elizabeth's Hospital was reborn as a clinic capable of providing both otolaryngology and internal medicine services after the renovation. Because it now housed departments frequently visited by the elderly within the same facility, everyone was pleased that the new doctors had taken over. Elizabeth is now living a more relaxed life, free from the demands of her job. I'm also considering early retirement and am currently busy handing over responsibilities to my juniors and subordinates. Amidst all this, Emma gave birth, making us grandparents. Claire, too, now that the clinic has settled down, is planning to formally marry her partner, so we're surrounded by joyous news. Elizabeth said, "Can I really be this happy? It's almost frightening how happy I am," to which I confidently responded, "Of course, it's all right. Do you remember what we did 15 years ago? We saved 2 children, there's no doubt about it. We rescued them, and in turn, they brightened our lives. This happiness is the result of everyone's feelings coming together. It's only natural for us to be happy." Hearing this, Elizabeth smiled happily. When we visited Emma's house some time later, I noticed red sweet peas adorning the room. As I looked at them, Emma, with a downward gaze, shared, "I hadn't seen her since that wedding. It seems she quit the florist shop, but when she left, she told the owner, 'If those kids come, please give them this,' and that was this." I knew the language of sweet peas, as it's quite well known. Indeed, they symbolize farewell. Emma continued, "It's not just any farewell, but the kind you give to someone important when parting ways. In her own way, she must be starting to atone for what she's done. We'll probably never forgive them, but you know, flowers are innocent. So, I thought I'd take care of it until it withers." It was so like Emma. She's a person of integrity and, more than anyone, can empathize with others. While we are her parents, those people were her parents too. At least the mom had some semblance of affection. But they are no longer relevant to us. By the way, Claire is going to have a wedding with her fiancé soon. Really, since they're both doctors, I wonder if it'll be a grand celebration. They're planning to have a small ceremony with just family in Hawaii, and then a reception back here. Ah, that sounds lovely. I'm looking forward to it. Oh, Lily is crying. Father, why don't you hold her? Prompted, I cradled my granddaughter in my arms, admiring her adorable face. And as the sweet peas wilted, Emma and Claire stopped talking about their mom